بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, we'll be looking at the 20th juz today. And in this juz, we have three different surahs. We have Surah An-Naml, which is from the previous juz. Then we have the 28th surah of the Quran, which is Surah Al-Qasas. And then we also have the 29th surah, which is Surah Al-Ankabut, which is the surah of the spider. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the previous juz mentioned the story, the amazing story of Queen Sheba, which is Sulaiman alayhi salam, and how he gave dawah to Queen Sheba and she became Muslim. Now, this part of the surah, which is mentioned in this juz, ends the surah by discussing matters related to the resurrection and related to Tawheed and related to the Quran. Then we come to Surah Al-Qasas, and this is an amazing surah, a surah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Musa alayhi salam in many surahs of the Quran, around 28, 29 surahs of the Quran he is mentioned. But he is mentioned in so much detail in this particular surah that it's almost as though this is a chronological biography from the time that he was born until at least he took the Bani Israel out of Egypt. Now in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this surah is in actual fact a surah that was revealed towards the Meccan period. And this is around the time when the Prophet ﷺ knows that he's going to go to Medina, and he is being forced out from Medina, from Mecca to from his people. And this is this surah, Surah Al-Qasas, is like giving him some kind of consolation, in that it is telling him that he will at some point in the future return from Medina to go back to Mecca. Why do we know this? We know this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in great detail the early stage of, or the early life of Musa alayhi salam, how he was born, how his mother threw him into the Nile because she feared that the soldiers will kill Musa alayhi salam, because at that time Fir'aun commanded his soldiers to kill all the baby boys. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how he was brought up in the palace of Fir'aun, and then he accidentally killed an individual. He punched someone. He didn't intend to kill him. It was a Coptic man. He feared for his life. He goes to Madian, just like the Prophet ﷺ. He goes to Medina. Musa alayhi salam goes to Madian. There he helps these two young women, and he marries one of them. And his father-in-law gives him a choice of 8 or 10 years working for him as a part of mahar. He chooses the 10th. Then he comes back. Now this is like the Prophet ﷺ coming back from Medina to Mecca. He comes back and he is being given prophethood, and then he is commanded to speak to Fir'aun. The surah also discusses matters related to Qarun towards the end of the surah, in fact. And this Qarun was an individual who was from the Bani Israel. He was one of the rich people from the Bani Israel, but he was on the side of Pharaoh. They say he was so rich that there had to be a number of men carrying the keys to open up his treasure. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us on how he was destroyed. He was swallowed by the earth. Then we come to the final surah of this juz, and that is Surah Al-Ankabut, which is the surah of the spider. Now this surah is really a surah about fitna. It's about trials and tribulations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the opening passage of this surah, he says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. That do people believe just by saying that they believe, that they will not be tried, that they will not be tested? Of course, even though we all affirm to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is not enough. We may be tried, we may be tested. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then mentions a number of the prophets who went through major tests. He mentions the story of Nuh alayhi salam and how he was giving da'wah to his people for 950 years, and they were then there was a flood. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and how he was tested, and that was when he was a young man and he was thrown into the fire. The reason why he was thrown into the fire is because he destroyed all of the idols. He confronted his people, his nation, and they made a fire so big that they had to catapult him into it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that he made that fire bardan wa salam, that he made this fire cool and peaceful. This is where the surah ends, Surah Al-Ankabut, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of some of the solutions on how, or some things that we require in order to go through those tests, which will be mentioned in the next juz, which is the 21st juz. Until then, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.